Hello! Welcome to Steampunk Academy Virtual Science Happy Hour, the only happy hour where it's all you can drink science, which may or may not be happy. Tonight we're talking with research intern Molly Warner from the Tracy Aviary. She's going to tell us all about light pollution, how it affects bird migrations here in Salt Lake City, and spoiler alert, it's not great, and what you can do to help. You'll want to take notes because there will be a quiz on Saturday, May 9th. It's more like a fun pub trivia game. We'll talk to Lucia about that in a bit. But first, Molly, what are you drinking?
Hello. I'm drinking a concoction that I made in this hotel room. I stuck some tequila into a tiny pesto jar and put it in here with some ginger beer and lime. So it's like a tequila mule because it's Cinco de Mayo.
Yeah.
All right.
So is there like a little bit of pesto essence in there?
You know, I haven't tasted that yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if it came through. But if it does, then I guess I just created something.
Yeah.
Like a savory cocktail could work.
Yeah,
Right.
like a
There's any mixologists out there that can rip the idea off from you.
Yeah, totally. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
What are you drinking, Sky?
I'm drinking the same thing you're drinking.
Which is?
The Lunchbox. Green Urban Lunchbox Hard Cider from Mountain West.
Yeah, so Mountain West Hard Cider is here in Salt Lake City, and they partner with Green Urban Lunchbox once a year. We mentioned them last week on our show, so
they are not a sponsor, but we love them.
Yeah, we just love them. Like,
Yeah.
I had to pay for this. Like, can't get any more. And it's very limited. What they do is, Mountain West, of course, is available year round. But the Green Urban Lunchbox, they gather up fruits and vegetables and from the community. So those fruit trees that you can't handle all the apples with. Make sure you can see it. And one of the things they do with the apples that aren't necessarily like the greatest to just eat, they turn into cider. And so this was all made with apples found throughout the city, which is pretty cool. So we just wanted to plug them, even though they're not sponsoring us. But if you want to, if you're out there listening, you're welcome to. So it's Cinco de Mayo. I have an interesting story about Cinco de Mayo. I realized, I don't know if I told you this, Molly, but before, but 13 years ago, I went to a Tool concert in Las Cruces, New Mexico on Cinco de Mayo. Which was kind of a random thing to do. But it was because I had just moved down to southern New Mexico to do like a seasonal bird survey job. It was the absolute worst job I ever had in my life, and I kept going back every year. 4 years. I don't know why, but maybe we'll get into that later, actually. Yeah. So, Molly, we're not here to talk about me. Tell us about what you do at the Tracy Aviary and how you got there.
So with the aviary, I'm a research intern. Technically, I work alongside the director of conservation, Cooper. She's awesome. We were kind of colleagues in college. She was in a grad program, and I was helping out in the undergrad in that lab. And so we kind of became friends. And then I moved out to Salt Lake a little over a year ago for a different job. I'm also an environmental consultant, biologist out here. And so I had just reached out to Cooper probably like last fall and just kind of knew that nonprofits, I feel like they always have really amazing data sets that they kind of want to be able to, work with, but sometimes they're maybe short staffed or they don't have people who can really like dedicate a chunk of time to helping them out. So I thought that it would be a good chance to kind of see what the aviary was doing. So I reached out to Cooper, and she said that among some data sets that they had, they've been working on this thing called SLACS, which is kind of the basis of the talk today. It stands for Salt Lake Avian Collision Society. And they pretty much just have this amazing data set from a lot of community scientists. People in Salt Lake have really been working together to pretty much comb the streets of downtown during migrations and see what birds have hit what buildings yeah, it's kind of intense, thankless work. But so basically, yeah, Cooper was like, hey, I have this data set. You want to work on it? And so we've just kind of been going back and forth, and a bunch of people at the aviary have been super helpful. And we're just kind of trying to piece out what they have and see if we can kind of come up with any new questions and anything new that we can figure out from bird collisions, especially in the Western U.S.
So, tell us about these bird collisions. Like, how many are we talking about here? How big of a problem is it?
It's getting to be, I guess it was always kind of a problem, ever since skyscrapers kind of came up in the States. But as it becomes studied more and more, we're kind of realizing what it's doing to local bird communities. So basically kind of the way it works and the way that we're kind of looking into it is sort of bird collisions tied with light pollution. So because we're Salt Lake City and we live right next to the Great Salt Lake, we're actually a really good migratory path for birds to fly through to get wherever they're going to, when they vacation in Mexico or hang out in Canada. We're kind of in the middle and we're helping them through. But what actually happens is, since Salt Lake is such a big city, especially in Utah and kind of anywhere around, we have a lot of light pollution just because of the buildings down there, street lights, cars, various things. And so what happens is these birds they're hanging out and they migrate at night. A lot of times, a lot of these songbirds will migrate at night because it's they kind of forage during the day and it's just better for them at night. And so they'll kind of get drawn into the city and then get a little disoriented by the lights. And usually they use different cues to kind of help them migrate. So they're getting kind of confused, bouncing around in the city. Eventually they get so exhausted that a lot of research has found that they'll smack into buildings, usually like in the early hours of the morning, kind of when the buildings start become more reflective, especially with glass. So it's kind of like a two-parter. We're kind of interested in the light pollution and also kind of what's making them hit buildings. And usually the building hits result in fatalities. I suppose we don't really have a super good way of figuring out, how many hit and fly away, since our studies are kind of collecting them when they're dead.
Wow. That's sad.
Yeah, we have a whole photo set, actually. We had an event early March, and I was I had the chipper job. I claimed that it was the dead bird photo room. It was just like our community scientists, when they pick them up, they'll take photos. And so it was just an entire room of dead bird photos, which a lot of people didn't know that, I think, going into it. So I felt a little bad, like, hey, welcome to the dead bird room. But no, it is like, yeah, I mean, it is pretty sad when you see it, for sure. If you're even just walking around Salt Lake, it can be a bummer, for sure.
Wow.
I mean, it seems like yeah, it is terrible for sure. Almost, but seeing those photos makes it pretty salient. It shows that this is the problem, right? This is something to be thinking about.
Yeah, it's a good way. I mean, it's a captivating way, I should say, of getting people to even think about this and get involved. Even if you don't like birds, you don't really want to see. I mean, most people, I think, don't want to see living things suffer. So yeah, even if you're not a bird fan, you're like, I kind of don't want to see them just be dead on the sidewalk. So I think it's a good opportunity to kind of take that and be like, okay, what can we do? And I want to learn more about it. A lot of people were really interested afterwards in kind of seeing what this whole project was about.
Yeah. So what kind of buildings are like what makes the buildings more dangerous to birds than others?
We've kind of found, and a lot of research has suggested sort of that glass is a really bad indicator, or I suppose how you shake it. It's a good indicator of a hit. It's a bad thing kind of for birds, which stinks, obviously, because you don't want a building that's like covered in concrete. Like, that's not going to be a very attractive building. But you do find that glass is usually like percentage of glass on a building facade is one of the highest indicators of birds hitting. People have kind of tried to figure out whether is it reflective glass or transparent glass, or what types of glass. And I think biologists are kind of getting on that train, but I also think, like, they don't know, like we don't know a ton about glass itself and those things. So that could definitely be an interesting crossover with engineering and biology to kind of figure out maybe even more in depth what it is about the glass. But I can say that just in general, like larger glass facades, usually it's because vegetation nearby is kind of reflected in it. So they might think they're flying towards a tree or a shrub or something, and it actually ends up being glass. Or if it's like one of those fancy walkways or something where you can kind of see through the glass and you can see past it, they actually will kind of think that they can just fly right through. So that's also proven to be problematic for them. So yeah, I would say kind of percentage of glass and like local nearby vegetation. Those are kind of like some big reasons why birds might get confused and fly into buildings.
So does do scientists know why it happens? Like, is it because the city looks like the moon shining on the lake or something like that?
I think it's it's kind of it's interesting. There's not super clear-cut answers on the light pollution side, which is kind of why we're trying to figure it out. I do know that it is just sort of like it just sort of acts as like a beacon for them. They use a few different light sources, maybe it's the moon or stars. Various birds are kind of different, but yeah, basically they just see the brightness. And I think they think that it's like the moon or one of their natural kind of guidances. And then they just sort of like get trapped in it and get honed in towards it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. Poor birds.
I know.
Yeah. Is there times, so we were talking about skyscrapers in like downtown cities. What about like around the house, like in the suburbs? Is there something I can do to prevent, like, is it an issue even at just a house or a small apartment building? And is there things that you can do to try to prevent collisions there?
Yeah, definitely. I remember growing up, my mom's bird feeder, there would be birds that would get startled for whatever reason. And then you're just like hanging out in the living room and it's like smacks into the window and you're like, oh, dang it, there's another one. But so, yeah, it's actually interesting. They found that there's a certain length of where your bird feeder is. It's sort of like if it's super close to your window, that's actually a little bit better because if the birds get scared and fly away, like they can't pick up enough speed to really like launch themselves into the window and die. And if it's super far away, they also like should be able to kind of redirect themselves. And I think it's one of those things, like I'd have to check the numbers again, but it's like less than 3 feet and I think you're good. And then like over 15 maybe, but I can definitely check on that. So it's like that sweet spot in the middle is kind of that like danger zone. Which is problematic for some people. I realize like people don't have like super vast yards or maybe putting it up close to their house. Like I remember like my mom was always worried about like mice getting into the foundation or something, So the bird feeder, kind of where you place it, like that can even be your own science experiment. If you find that you have a ton of birds flying into your window, like maybe try putting it farther away or closer. Monitor those things that maybe you were worried about, like the mice getting in or something like that. And then if you don't have a bird feeder, but you also feel like birds are just smacking themselves into your window, there's also, you've probably seen it, there are these kind of like stickers you can put on windows. They're supposed to kind of show birds like, hey, this is a window, you can't fly through it. And it's interesting. I've found out that just putting like one sticker on your window kind of doesn't really cut it. They'll sort of see the one sticker and be like, oh, I'll avoid that, but I'm going to fly over here and still run into your window. So if you want to see a good example of what a good bird safe building is, actually the aviary has a really good setup. I don't know if everyone's seen Tracy Aviary, walked by it if you're in Liberty Park, but on the windows, they have this little like sticker grid system. So it's this like constant pattern, and that pattern, having that consistency, actually helps break up the window frame for the bird's line of vision. So it's like they can see that it's, this consistent thing. It's not just a single sticker slapped in, and that helps them to avoid it. And then the aviary has like this kind of cool, like metal bird cage over it, which I realize is super unrealistic for people in their house to like build their own bird cage over their house. So I would say anything that you can do that kind of creates a consistent pattern, or if you do get kind of single stickers, try to maybe put them in a pattern. Smaller obviously would be a little bit better, so it just doesn't look like you're clouding up your window. But there are definitely options, and I think if you can just Google, anything you want of like, hey, bird stickers for my window, my birds keep running into it. So there's hope if you have kind of like a bird collision issue at your own house too. So that's nice.
Do you like watching your mom's bird feeders? Was that at all an inspiration to like where you are today, or like what got you into what you do? I feel like the bird feeder was definitely it was kind of like a cause for being interested. I remember just kind of like hanging out in my backyard a lot and mimicking bird noises. And in particular, I remember I had gotten this one bird noise down. And so I showed my friend at school, and I was in like second grade. And I don't think my friend was like interested in my bird call at all. So, but I did it anyways. And then I just remember like other people, they heard me and they were like making fun of me, and it was like the saddest thing, when you're little. And I just remember being like so upset, like, oh man, like people don't get the bird thing. And I remember my freshman year of college, my mentor, he took a chance on me and gave me a job, and it was amazing. And I just remember thinking like, oh, cool. Like I'm able to work in this now, and like, it felt cool to be able to like look back and be like, oh, you maybe were like a weird little child doing bird calls, but like it paid off, right? So I get to do what I love to do now. So, but yeah, I think like just in general, like just being curious and being outside. And my brothers and I always played outside, and I know that's kind of like a cliche answer of like I was outside as a child, but I think it's kind of like, I don't know. I think like childhood, you have all this sense of wonder, and then there's those like murky, weird teenage years where like that stuff isn't super cool anymore, and then you kind of like lift the veil and you're like, oh, I like this again, and I like being outside and that stuff. So I'm glad I found it again, I guess. Do you remember any of those calls?
Yeah, I can do the one that I got made fun of as a child now to Facebook and YouTube Live if you guys want.
We would love it, but we're not going to put any pressure on you.
Okay, it was I'll just do it. It doesn't matter. I can't even see who's really logged on, so it's totally fun. But it was a morning dove, which you guys have probably. Oh well, actually, so I'll do a morning dove, which I like. They're these little like beige dove-sized birds. Got little black spots on their wings. You've probably seen them a lot. But their call goes woo 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 woo. If you have heard that outside, they're kind of all over. Thank you. And then actually when my family gets together, sometimes they ask me to do the bird call that I hate. That's strong for a biologist to say that they don't like a bird. But it's the Eurasian collared dove. And it's this like introduced bird, and it kind of outcompetes mourning doves. So that's pretty sad. So I just have this ongoing joke, like with my boyfriend and my family, about the Eurasian collared dove and how they kind of stink. But if you all have probably heard them, they've probably interrupted like a nice time that you've had in your backyard, and they go, ah, ah. That's Eurasian collared dove.
Yeah.
Did you guys recognize it?
Yeah, I didn't know that one. I knew the other one. I didn't know the other one. Yeah.
So, yeah, next time you hear one, think of me, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, and your poor high school bullies, maybe, or young elementary school bullies are out there, and
yeah,
jokes on them.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, this doesn't have to be like a success story about how I overcame bird bullying, but I guess that's what it turned into.
That was a little off topic, but it was great. It was brilliant. So like one thing we were really interested about your project is that the ability for people to get involved. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Or?
Yeah. So we've had a really great, the aviary has a tremendous network of community scientists, pretty much all ages, and people from any background, which is kind of something that we were talking about. You can kind of, you don't have to have like a biology degree, or you don't have to even you just have to be interested in these things, which I think is really special. The aviary is amazing at kind of leading people through and teaching them and kind of setting up these robust ways to do the community science. So the way that we've involved the community through it, we have kind of like a Cooper set up the study. So we sort of have like 20 square blocks downtown that are kind of pieced out. And during spring migration, like April through May, and then fall migration, like September to October, the community scientists will actually go around to certain buildings. And we have kind of like a set of buildings that we know now kind of they collide in random buildings to kind of offset the study design. So they'll go around to buildings and then just kind of, walk around all four sides. I don't know if there's some weird ones that have like 5 sides. Anyways, so they'll walk around, and if they are comfortable, if they come across a collision, like a mortality collision, if they're comfortable, they can pick up the bird. And we equip them with like bags and things, and they can kind of like try to ID it to the best of their abilities. And so, sorry, excuse me. So if they're comfortable, they can collect the bird. The aviary has a permit, actually a take permit. So we can take the birds and we actually freeze them and eventually give them to the Natural History Museum. And they can use them in various exhibits and things like that if the specimens are up to snuff. And then, basically the community scientists just kind of gather some information about it, like what side of the building did it hit on, what time did you find it, what kind of bird was it, what's the sort of like deceased state, like how far along is it in decomposing, and we collect the data. We on the back end, and some community scientists as well, we've done some building measurements. So we kind of know everything about the buildings down there. That's pretty much it. The community scientists, though, have been great. I mean, it's a huge effort to kind of go around to each building, and the pathways sometimes aren't really super straightforward. There's shrubs that you kind of have to look under, and but it's a nice way to get out, I guess, and kind of get to know the city a little bit more. And and if anybody is interested in that, interested in wanting to kind of help out the aviary, there's if you look on the conservation page, tracyaviaryconservation.org, you can find some more information on that and ways to sign up and get kind of linked up with the SLACS project.
Cool. What does SLACS stand for again?
Salt Lake Avian Collision Society.
Awesome. Does it have a Slack channel?
I don't know. It should. That would fulfill the pun or the alliteration, or whatever we would work at. Maybe we'll have to talk about that later.
I wonder too, like how much. So of course, there's the mortality of the birds hitting it, but you said that they get disoriented and things. So like we don't know how many birds are like just losing energy, wasting time in our cities trying to get around, right, on their ways out. I wonder, is there any way of measuring that? I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I think it does, because even if they don't hit, that's obviously not good for their fitness, their overall fitness. And that would be an interesting side to kind of figure out, who's kind of getting trapped in here and getting disoriented. I guess an idea for that could be to kind of add a bird survey component of it, maybe in the wee early hours of the morning, doing like point count surveys, kind of where you sit in certain spots and then for 5 or 10 minutes kind of see what's flying around in a certain radius. And potentially you could find maybe that there are some kind of non-resident type birds that are sort of in the city. You know, I guess you'd expect kind of the usual pigeon and sparrow, but, you know, maybe there's kind of a more forested or woodland species that you would see. Maybe you could see signs of kind of distress or tiredness. So that could be an interesting component. I haven't really seen anybody kind of measure exhaustion in that way, but it could be something cool to look into, for sure.
Yeah.
We have a great question that just came in on YouTube. What about windmills?
Yeah, windmills are kind of it's kind of one of those things, right? Like renewable energy is obviously very important to, you know, try to figure out how we can incorporate that more into our lives. And I guess it kind of stinks that it does come at the price of some birds do kind of get sucked in and pulled into it. From what I know, I think windmills are more of an issue with larger birds, kind of like raptor species, hawks, things like that, golden eagles, bald eagles. I know a lot of people have definitely dedicated a bunch of their time and research and energy into windmills. So yeah, they're definitely there. It's kind of like a toss up, right? Like they're not good for a lot of larger birds. But then sort of like at what cost is renewable energy? Those are kind of my thoughts on it. I haven't looked too much into windmills for this project. There have been some papers that kind of pop up about communication towers, which are kind of similar. They have like those blinking red lights, and that blinking light, they found that if they change the frequency of the blinking light or even like change the color, birds won't get drawn into it as much. So that's kind of interesting. I think windmills have lights on them at night too, though, so things don't run into them. So there could be a little bit of crossover, you know, maybe working with the lights there. But I know people are working on the windmill thing, but I don't know a ton about like ways to mitigate that for those larger raptor species. Build a lot of tiny windmills. Maybe that's it. Maybe we all do like the little ones that like
the little pinwheels.
Yeah. We'll make our own little pinwheels. Then it'll just hit like hummingbirds. It'll just like mess up little birds.
Yeah. You said
Keep them away from sugar water and we'll be fine.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. They'll be healthier.
you had mentioned before the other day that hummingbirds are actually oftentimes victims of the hitting windows. Was that correct?
Yeah.
Well,
We found that sort of the three kind of like big types of like big overarching guilds that are kind of hitting are New World sparrows, wood warblers, and hummingbirds. So there have been some papers that keep kind of finding those like sparrows and warblers and hummingbirds are kind of continuing to hit. There are some theories out there, but we don't fully know why hummingbirds hit as much. It could be something about, I don't know, how fast they're moving, or maybe the way that they kind of intake light or the way that they see. But I would say that we see that trend. We see hummingbirds hitting buildings, which is sad because everybody really likes hummingbirds. But as to why they're hitting, we don't necessarily know yet, which is kind of one of the big questions that we want to figure out, that we're interested in is, are there specific reasons or specific parts of a building that make a bird more susceptible to hit it? And is it different for different birds? Like, for example, does a hummingbird hit a building that's taller than 20 feet or something, So we're kind of trying to run some comparisons to see why certain birds hit, and hopefully see some trends. And then if not, then kind of figure something else out is usually how it goes. But yeah, we don't fully know why hummingbirds hit.
We have another great question from Facebook. Someone says, I live near 9th and 9th. Should I not have a front porch light to reduce light pollution, or does an individual house really make a difference? Yeah,
I think that's a great question. I think this is sort of that point where, you don't want these things to get super like, you have to do it. You're part of the problem. Like, I think it's more of like it can be more of an optimistic thing. I would say, it's kind of based on your own personal preference. Maybe if you feel most comfortable with your front porch light on, if you live in, a part of town or situation, where you just want that light on. I don't think I would ever like tell anybody, like you have to keep you're in your house totally dark. But I know some people will kind of keep them on and then towards the night or when they go to bed, turn it off. And I think that, if you're comfortable with that and not having it on, that's good. And if it's sort of one of those things too, like you don't want it on all the time, but maybe like you usually want it on, we actually have a lights out initiative that we're starting that we have these really cool posters. I have one in my front yard that says I fight the light for birds. And it's, I'm pretty sure the time frame is kind of like a 10 p.m. to like early-ish morning thing through these certain migration times. So the spring and the fall migrations are really important for a lot of these birds. So even if it's not something that you want to do as a total lifestyle change, could be good to kind of, add that in at those certain migration times and maybe turn your lights off then to even just sort of be a little conscious of it. And then the second part of the question is, does an individual house make a difference? And I think if you think of it as one individual house might not, but if you think of kind of a collective neighborhood, you can kind of make a difference in that way. So it's kind of a matter of perspective too, as well. Like maybe one house like is not going to draw an entire, migrating, cohort of birds right to your house, but maybe kind of if you have a pretty well lit up neighborhood, that could kind of disrupt them a little bit. So, and John said motion sensors, which is a good idea too. And Lou responded, try it out with one light, see how that works. Sometimes motion sensors are scary because you're like, is someone like in my backyard? It's just like a leaf. But yeah, and I think too, houses are important, but also cities are kind of getting on the bandwagon of trying to figure out what they can do about lights. It's kind of like, oh, if I turn my lights on, but there's a street light right out front, what's that doing? Like, is it really helping if I turn my lights out? So some cities are actually taking pledges to try to reduce light pollution. And there's some talks of certain cities kind of having like these smart grids and turning lights on and off, like, even talks of like motion censored street lights, I think, which would be really cool. Obviously it's money and infrastructure and all those things and kind of like a collective desire. But I know some desert cities like Tucson actually has a really good night skies program, kind of just because their like desert air brought a lot of astronomers. And then it just kind of became a collective thing that Tucson was like, yeah, we want to see the stars at night and, working towards that. So I think it's cool, and just getting people to think about it, maybe encourage like a neighbor or a friend to try it out. Motion sensors or kind of our lights out initiative during spring and fall migrations are really good places to start for sure.
Yeah, I remember I lived in Flagstaff, Arizona for a while, and they were one of those dark skies kind of cities also. And it was not intended for bird migrations. It was intended for all the like observatories out. Then it had this added benefit. Is
it's one of those, it's a nice kind of like side thing, if it's helpful for the observatories, the birds and humans are also kind of benefiting from the lack of light pollution. So it's kind of like, it can be a catch-all.
Yeah, definitely. There's all sorts of problems with the light pollution that we experience too, with all that light coming in. So I know I run into windows all the time.
Yeah.
Got to get your natural circadian rhythm,
Yeah.
And have the light messing it up.
Does the color of the light matter? Like if you had like redder or more orange lights, would that help? When you do like photography, like in the old days, you can have an orange or red light on your photosensitive stuff, and it doesn't affect the exposure.
Yeah, I want to say that the light color does matter. And I know this because when the museum was open, the aviary had a really great partnership with the Natural History Museum, a Nature All Around Us exhibit, and it had some really good information on that. And they did mention that like certain color lights, and I don't know exactly what color, but I'm assuming it could probably be more of that like orange and red sort of light do make a difference, which is cool. And I learned that from that exhibit, which was really fun.
I helped. I was
she was one of the designers on it.
Oh, that's awesome. See, you know about light. You know about the color parts way better than I do.
I came on pretty late after all the content had been developed, and I just helped put the content pretty on pages and walls and stuff.
Yeah.
But actually, on their dead bird exhibit, all labeled the most poor dead birds in formaldehyde.
So you've seen it all too. You've seen the
seen the devastation.
Yes. Yeah. Hopefully the exhibit, people can enjoy it when the museum opens back up. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
It was a great exhibit though, for sure.
It was a lot of fun.
Cool. Well, I mean, we're getting kind of towards near the end of our little show right now. But I wanted to make sure we spent some time to talk about this quiz coming up.
Yeah.
So what's going on with that?
So, well, first of all, can you make us a cheat sheet?
For
our team.
For the quiz on Saturday. I don't know. Yeah, no, I can. If you I don't know. I think you guys would have it for sure.
Okay.
You'll probably win, I'm sure. But yeah, I helped test it out. It should be cool. Zoom trivia, which is awesome that the aviary is kind of running with that. I know that sometimes these things can be a little weird or clunky, but it's going to be really sweet. And just kind of talking about general night sky, light pollution, bird sort of things. And yeah, if you guys have run like trivia things, the setup's cool. You kind of like will get into like teams, and then you kind of like break out and then answer questions.
Yeah, it's gonna be great.
Yeah, and so that'll be this Saturday, May 12th at, is it 7 or?
Yeah, it's at 7.
Yeah, 7 p.m. Saturday, May 12th.
No, May 9th.
9th. Sorry. May 12th is definitely not a Saturday. Yeah, so Saturday, May 9th. We just put the link up in Facebook, and we will get it out to everywhere else too. So
it's gonna be fun,
cool.
And especially if more people show up.
Got any other questions for Molly? Or?
How's your tequila mule thing?
It's really good. Yeah. It's definitely like a good idea to travel with like some ginger beer and limes and tequila. I'm definitely going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. How's your cider going?
I'm having more. Not well.
I had a question about that actually. So we have a peach tree in our backyard, and we could not keep up with all the peaches. Do they exclusively work with apples and make ciders, or do they like use peaches to make like other things?
Well, so the Green Urban Lunchbox, they're an organization that they'll take anything you have that's edible, that's grown in your yard, that you need out of there before it goes bad, and then they donate that to people that are experiencing food insecurity. Mountain West Hard Cider, I don't know if they have done anything besides, I don't know.
But you can do it yourself.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, we all got a lot more time on our hands, it seems like. We're sitting at home looking for arts and crafts. It's like, might as well make peach wine. Yeah.
Exactly. Just have it like aging in the garage. No, it's a good idea for sure. I think we'll have to do something like that this year.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And then invite us over and we'll taste it.
Yeah, definitely. You're more than welcome for sure.
I feel like we need to do a bird call too.
A bird call? I don't know any bird calls. I just do the classic, like if you just go like psh, 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 it like pisses them. It just like it's like the general piss a bird off call.
For sure.
Then they'll start like calling back to you if you do that. I guess we shouldn't be encouraging people to walk around their neighborhoods doing that. But if you do that, birds tend to respond to it for some reason. I don't know why. Yeah.
It's a really good way to embarrass like non-birding friends when you go on a hike and people are around and they're just like, what is up with that person?
Yeah, so like, yeah, I did bird research for a few years, but I was never that much of a birder, to be honest. I was like a total hack. But I mean, like people who are really into birding are really into birding.
Yeah.
That was my 5th grade science, or my 5th grade teacher.
Yeah.
And every spring, it's like this was something that every kid at Lone Pine Elementary School had to go through. If you got Mrs. Morrison, you had to do a unit on ornithology, and that was like basically what she did for science. So I had like my little notebook, and I kept track of all the birds I'd seen. I went to the San Diego Zoo just to get some exotic ones on there, and then I found out they didn't count.
Oh. They're like, where'd you see a parrot?
Yeah.
No, it's funny. I feel like now, you know, some friends are kind of getting into these hobbies that I've sort of been into, you know, the like old people hobbies, like being into birds and plants and things, because we have so much time on our hands. So it's fun. People are like, I've actually been paying attention to birds in my backyard. Like I never thought I'd be a birder, but turns out it's a great thing to do when you want to like be away from people, because you can go birding and like, you know, random ponds and things. And I think it's really fun. Like, I mean, it's kind of like a optimistic thing that came from all this is like people are now kind of paying attention to like the natural world, which is cool.
Yeah, and like people are slowing down. All right, one big question I have to ask. What's your 3rd favorite bird?
My 3rd favorite bird. I really like, let's see. There's so many. I feel like hummingbirds are kind of like at the top of the list. I really like, okay. Yeah, I got it. And they're at the aviary too, which is cool. I've never seen them in the wild, but I love them because of the stuff that they get into. The Kia, if you guys have heard of them, they're the like New Zealand, just like they cause a ruckus. They are just this like crazy kind of like little green parrot. Well, not like little, like this big green parrot. And if you look on the internet, there are a ton of really interesting stories of Kias kind of like messing up people's lives. Like they will sort of like steal shoelaces out of like hiker shoes if you leave them out. They've been known to like chew glue on your windshield and like windshields will fall in. I think there was some report somewhere along the lines of they were messing up a construction site. So they had to build them like a playground so that they would stop messing with the construction site. They were like knocking over cones or doing something crazy and like were really thwarting the progress. So they had to build them like a Kia jungle gym. And actually at the aviary, if you see their exhibit, they have like always so much stuff going on and they're always destroying something. So they're really fun to watch. And the aviary has like a really cool breeding program as well. Because they're dwindling, their populations are dwindling. So if you have a chance when the aviary opens up again to check out the Kia exhibit, because they're always getting into something. They're so mischievous. So that's my 3rd favorite bird. Let's go with that.
Oh, that's amazing.
I love those.
We might have to cut it off there so I can like go and start watching Kia videos on YouTube.
Totally. One more question. What's the one that sounds like cigar? Cigar?
I have no idea. What does it look like?
I don't know. I've only heard it around.
Maybe Lou, who is hanging out in the chat with the aviary, can respond back, or maybe we will have some social media shout outs of some people who are you know me, I just know Eurasian collar dove and mourning dove. That's all I got.
Oh no.
Stumped.
Maybe it's more of a California thing.
It could be. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll wait for the day of like a a Shazam bird calling app.
Yes. Somebody watching, go make that.
It might exist. I don't know. Sounds like something that could exist, but
Yeah, probably does. Or not, it needs to happen.
Yeah.
yeah, totally.
So yeah, I think we're just at about 45 minutes, so I guess we got to wrap up and go about our lives. I do want to remind people we have trivia on May 9th, and we'll send out links to that, make sure everyone has that. We also have our next virtual science happy hour. We have a science illustrator. He's going to be talking about the birds we can no longer see, but he gets to draw because he does a lot of paleontology stuff. So that's Rob Soto, and he is going to be talking on May 12th. After that, we are going to kind of take a break from this model so we can start working on our projects for the late summer and fall. We are going to definitely still do our adult science fair. Of course, it depends on all sorts of the way the pandemic goes, but that'll definitely happen. Hopefully, starting in June is when we'll like kick off the project with the big event happening later in the fall. And we will definitely keep going on the virtual science happy hour, except hopefully what we also want to do in the future after a short break is be actually sitting across a bar with the scientist and streaming that. So
hopefully.
Yeah.
As long as the COVID stays away.
Yes.
Yes.
As long as we do our part, right?
Yeah. Do your part.
Yeah.
So we can do that later.
One porch light doesn't matter that much, but if we all wear masks, if we all social distance, if we all stay home when we don't need to leave, we'll be back to things sooner rather than later.
And in the meantime, the birds will enjoy us being out of the nature.
Yeah.
Totally. And they'll enjoy us listening in our own yards.
Yeah, and thank you so much for taking out time while you're out in the field. You are traveling right now to go do research, and so thanks for taking your time. You got more important things to do. It's been a blast. Yeah.
It has been a blast. Yeah, thank you so much, Justice and Sky. I love this, and maybe someday we'll be able to do this in a real bar. That'd be cool.
Yes. And we'll buy the first round.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Cheers.